Nathan. Show us what you've got." Tyler Morrison's voice echoed through the cafeteria, dripping with mock encouragement that made his friends burst into laughter. The entire lunch period had gone silent. 300 students watched as the blind black kid from Mrs. Henderson's music class stood frozen near the vending machines, his white cane tapping nervously against the linoleum floor. "My name is Nathan Williams, and I'm 16 years old. I've been blind since birth, and I've spent most of my high school years perfecting the art of being invisible. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon at Riverside High, invisibility was no longer an option. Tyler, captain of the basketball team and unofficial king of the senior class, had cornered me with what he called a golden opportunity. The spring talent show was 3 weeks away, and apparently someone had suggested I audition. The way Tyler said it, with that particular tone that made his crew snicker, told me everything I needed to know about whose idea this really was. "We heard you sing in music class," Tyler continued, his voice carrying across the cafeteria like he was performing for an audience, which, of course, he was. "Mrs. Henderson said you have potential, so we thought, hey, why not give Nathan a shot at the big stage?" The laughter that followed wasn't even trying to hide its cruelty. I'd heard this tone before, felt this energy before. It was the same vibe from freshman year when someone had accidentally moved my backpack 3 feet to the left, then filmed me searching for it. That video got 2,000 views before the principal made them take it down. It was the same energy from sophomore year when I'd been invited to a study group that turned out to be an empty classroom. And another viral video opportunity. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the fact that I'd spent the last 2 years actually working on my voice. Maybe it was the memory of my grandmother's words before she passed. "Baby, they can take a lot of things from you, but they can't take your gift. And when the time comes, you make sure they hear it." Or maybe it was just exhaustion. Exhaustion from being the punchline. Exhaustion from making myself smaller so others could feel bigger. Exhaustion from pretending I didn't notice the whispers, the moved chairs, the accidental shoulder checks in the hallway. "Sure," I heard myself say, "I'll audition." The cafeteria erupted, not in support, in disbelief and barely contained glee. This was going to be entertainment. The blind kid on stage, probably making a fool of himself. Content gold. Tyler's hand landed on my shoulder, with false camaraderie. "That's what I'm talking about. See, guys? Nathan's a good sport. Auditions are next Monday after school. Don't be late, man." As they walked away, their laughter trailing behind them like toxic smoke, I heard Tyler's friend Brandon whisper, "Dude, this is going to be hilarious. Should we set up cameras?" "Already planning it," Tyler replied. What they didn't know, what nobody at Riverside High knew, was that I'd been training with Marcus Chen for the past 18 months. Marcus, a vocal coach who'd worked with actual Grammy winners, had moved to our town after retiring from the industry. He'd heard me humming in the grocery store where my mom worked and had offered free lessons on the spot. "You have something special," Marcus had told me during our first session. "But special isn't enough. You need to be undeniable. And when you're undeniable, Nathan, the world has no choice but to listen." For 18 months, I'd been working 3 times a week in Marcus's home studio, breathing exercises, vocal runs, range expansion, song interpretation. He'd pushed me harder than anyone ever had, and I'd pushed back, desperate to transform the one thing I had, my voice, into something that couldn't be ignored, mocked, or dismissed. My mom didn't even know the full extent of it. She knew about the lessons, sure, but she didn't know about the recordings Marcus had sent to his industry contacts. She didn't know that 2 of them had already responded with interest. She didn't know that Marcus believed I had a legitimate shot at something bigger than Riverside High's spring talent show. But I knew, and as I walked out of that cafeteria, my cane tapping a steady rhythm against the floor, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. That evening I sat in Marcus's studio, telling him what had happened. "So they're setting you up," Marcus said, his voice neutral. Classic high school cruelty. They want to watch you fail. Yeah, and you said yes anyway. Yeah. There was a long pause. Then Marcus laughed, a deep, genuine sound that filled the small studio. Good, because we've been preparing for this moment, Nathan. Maybe not this exact scenario, but this moment, when you get to show them who you really are. What if I mess up? You won't. You know why? Because you've done the work. You've put in hundreds of hours that those kids have spent making TikToks and playing video games. You've trained with someone who's worked with the best in the world. And most importantly, you've got something they'll never have. What's that? Hunger. Real hunger. Not the kind that comes from wanting to be popular or wanting to win. The kind that comes from being underestimated your entire life and finally getting a chance to prove everyone wrong. We spent the next 2 hours working on song selection. Marcus had 3 options prepared, each one designed to showcase different aspects of my range and emotional delivery. We settled on a song that started quiet, almost vulnerable, before building into something powerful. Something that would take people on a journey. They're expecting you to fail, Marcus said as I was leaving. So when you don't, when you absolutely destroy that audition, it's going to hit them twice as hard as... Just remember, you're not performing for their approval. You're performing to show them what they missed while they were too busy laughing. The weekend before the audition, word had spread throughout Riverside High. I heard the whispers in the hallways, felt the energy shift when I walked into rooms. People were talking about it. The blind kid who was actually going through with the audition. Some voices carried pity, most carried amusement. A few carried something that might have been curiosity. Tyler made sure to check in with me twice, each time with that same false enthusiasm that barely masked his anticipation of my failure. You ready for Monday, Nathan? Got your song picked out? Need any help getting to the auditorium? His friends always laughed at that last part, as if I hadn't been navigating Riverside High's hallways for 3 years without their help. On Sunday night, my mom found me in my room running through vocal exercises. Baby, you don't have to do this, she said softly. If those kids are setting you up to embarrass you, I know what they're doing, Mom. Then why? Because I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of making myself small because it makes other people comfortable. And because I paused, trying to find the right words, because Grandma was right. They can't take this from me, and it's time they heard it. I heard her move closer, felt her hand on my shoulder. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. I'm proud of you, no matter what happens tomorrow. Thanks, Mom, but I'm not worried about what happens tomorrow. And I wasn't, because while Tyler Morrison and his friends had spent the last week planning how to film my humiliation, I'd spent the last 18 months preparing for something they couldn't even imagine. While they'd been perfecting their mockery, I'd been perfecting my craft. Monday arrived with the weight of inevitability. The auditions were scheduled for 3:30 p.m. in the main auditorium. By lunch, it felt like the entire school knew about it. I heard my name in conversations I wasn't part of, felt the stares that had always been there but were now amplified by anticipation. In music class, Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside. Nathan, I heard you're auditioning today. I just want you to know that I think you have real talent. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. It was kind of her, but there was something in her voice, a protective concern that suggested she too thought I was walking into a trap, that I was a lamb heading to slaughter, and she felt guilty for not stopping it. What none of them understood was that I wasn't the lamb. I was something else entirely, something they'd underestimated because they'd never bothered to look past the white cane and the dark skin and their own assumptions about what I could or couldn't do. At 3:25 p.m., I made my way to the auditorium. My cane tapped against the familiar hallway floors, counting steps I'd memorized years ago. I could hear voices ahead, lots of them. The auditorium was packed. This wasn't normal for auditions. Usually only the drama teacher and a few student council members showed up to judge. But today was different. Today was a show, and I was the main attraction. As I entered through the side door, the noise level dropped slightly. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, could hear the whispers that people weren't even trying to hide, could sense the phones being raised, ready to capture whatever was about to happen. Tyler's voice cut through the murmur. "Nathan, there you are, man. We saved you a spot in line. You're up fifth. Fifth. Perfect. Enough time for the crowd to get comfortable, but not so late that people would leave. They'd really thought this through." I took my place in line, my heart steady despite everything. This was it. The moment Marcus and I had been preparing for. The moment my grandmother had promised would come. The moment when being underestimated would finally work in my favor. Because here's what Tyler Morrison and his friends didn't understand. When you spend your entire life being invisible, you learn to see things others miss. When you spend years being underestimated, you learn to use it as armor. And when you finally get your moment, your real moment, you don't waste it. The first 4 auditions passed in a blur of mediocre performances and polite applause. I barely registered them. My mind was in Marcus's studio, running through every lesson, every technique, every moment of preparation that had led to this. Then I heard it, the words I'd been waiting for. "Next up, we have Nathan Williams." The applause that followed was different from what the previous performers had received. It was louder, but not in a supportive way. It was the sound of an audience settling in for entertainment, for a spectacle, for something they could talk about tomorrow and probably film for social media. I made my way to the stage, my cane tapping against the steps. Someone, probably Tyler, had made sure there was no one to guide me up. Another test. Another opportunity for me to stumble, literally and figuratively. But I'd practiced these steps, knew this stage, had asked Mrs. Henderson for access to the auditorium twice over the past week, telling her I wanted to get comfortable with the space. She'd thought I was being cautious. She didn't realize I was being strategic. I reached the center of the stage, faced the audience I couldn't see, and waited for the laughter to die down. It took longer than it should have. Somewhere in the back, someone made a joke I couldn't quite hear, followed by another wave of snickering. Mr. Peterson, the drama teacher, cleared his throat. "Whenever you're ready, Nathan, what will you be performing today?" I told him the song title. There was a moment of silence, then a few confused murmurs. It wasn't a popular song, wasn't something from the radio or a trending TikTok sound. It was a classic, a song that required real vocal control and emotional depth. A song that would either prove I belonged on this stage or confirm every assumption they'd made about me. "Interesting choice," Mr. Peterson said, and I couldn't tell if he was impressed or concerned. "The track is ready when you are." I nodded, took a breath, and thought about my grandmother, about Marcus, about every person who'd ever moved my backpack, whispered behind my back, or treated me like I was less than human because I couldn't see their faces. And then, as the opening notes filled the auditorium, I opened my mouth and let them hear what they'd been missing all along. The first note hung in the air like a question, soft, vulnerable, almost fragile, exactly as Marcus and I had planned. Let them think they were right. Let them settle into their expectations. Let them raise their phones and prepare for the punchline. Then I'd show them there was no punchline. There was only the truth they'd been too blind to see. If you're enjoying this story of how underestimation can become someone's greatest weapon, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will redefine everything this school thought. They knew about the quiet, blind kid they'd been overlooking for 3 years, but in that moment, as my voice began to fill the auditorium with something none of them expected, I wasn't thinking about revenge or vindication or proving anyone wrong. I was thinking about my grandmother's words, about Marcus's training, and about the fact that sometimes the best response to cruelty isn't anger. It's excellence so undeniable that silence becomes the only possible reaction. The second note was stronger, more confident, and by the third, something shifted in the auditorium. The laughter died first, then the whispers, then everything else, until there was nothing but my voice filling a space that had been designed for mockery, but was now holding something entirely different. I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel the change. It was in the quality of the silence, in the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. This was the moment Marcus had prepared me for, the moment when disbelief transforms into recognition, when a joke becomes something no one knows how to process. The song built slowly, each phrase more powerful than the last. I'd spent months learning how to control my breathing, how to let emotion flow through my voice without overwhelming the technique. Marcus had been relentless about this. Technique without emotion is empty. Emotion without technique is chaos. You need both, Nathan. You need to make them feel something they can't ignore. As I moved into chorus, I let everything pour out. Every moved backpack, every accidental collision in the hallway, every video filmed without my consent, every time someone had spoken about me like I wasn't there, like being blind meant being deaf too. Every assumption, every low expectation, every moment of being treated as less than human. But I also poured in the good things. My grandmother's hands teaching me to feel music in my chest before I could understand it with my mind. My mother's voice reading to me every night, even when she was exhausted from double shifts. Marcus's patience, his belief, his refusal to let me settle for anything less than excellence. The bridge of the song required a run, a series of notes that climbed higher and higher, each one needing to be crystal clear and perfectly placed. It was technically difficult, the kind of thing that separated trained vocalists from people who just liked to sing. Marcus and I had worked on this section for weeks, and even he had admitted it was ambitious for someone my age. I hit every note. The final chorus was where everything came together. Power and control, emotion and precision. I held the last note longer than we'd practiced, feeling it resonate in my chest, letting it fill every corner of the auditorium until there was nowhere left for doubt to hide. When the music ended and my voice faded into silence, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just a void where mockery used to be. Then someone started clapping, slowly at first, then faster. Then another person joined, and another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted into applause that felt different from anything I'd experienced before. This wasn't polite. This wasn't obligatory. This was shock manifesting as sound. I stood there, my heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. I'd imagined this moment countless times, but the reality was bigger, more overwhelming than any fantasy. That was... Mr. Peterson's voice came through the speakers, and for once, the usually eloquent drama teacher seemed at a loss for words. Nathan, that was extraordinary, truly extraordinary, thank you. I made my way off the stage, my cane finding the steps I'd memorized. The applause continued, and I heard voices now. Excited chatter, disbelief, people trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. But I also heard silence from one specific section, the area where Tyler and his friends had been sitting. That silence spoke louder than any applause. In the hallway, after the auditions, I was surrounded by people who'd never spoken to me before. Voices I recognized from classes, but had never directed words at me, beyond the bare minimum. Nathan, that was incredible. Where did you learn to sing like that? Have you been taking lessons? Are you going to audition for that singing show on TV? I answered politely, briefly, still processing everything. But part of me was listening for something else. For Tyler's voice, for the sound of the plan falling apart. I found it near the vending machines, the same spot where this had all started. It's not that impressive, Tyler was saying to his friends, his voice carrying that defensive edge people get when reality doesn't match their expectations. Anyone can sound good with the right song choice and acoustics. The auditorium has great sound. Dude, come on, another voice said. Brandon, I thought. That was actually insane, like professionally good. Whatever. It's one performance. Doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. I could hear it. In the way Tyler's voice had lost its casual confidence, could feel it in the way the hallway energy had shifted. For 3 years, I'd been the punchline. Now suddenly, I was something else. And Tyler Morrison didn't know how to handle a narrative he couldn't control. That evening, my phone started blowing up. Someone had recorded the performance and posted it online. By dinner time, it had 3,000 views. By bedtime, 15,000. By morning, it had gone viral. My mom watched the video with tears streaming down her face. "Baby, I knew you were good, but this is something else." Marcus called at 7 a.m., which was unusual for him. "Nathan, I've gotten 6 calls this morning. 6. From people in the industry who saw your video. One of them is a talent scout for a major label. Another is a producer who works with some of the biggest names in R&B. They want to meet you." I should have been excited, should have been celebrating, but all I could think about was going back to school, walking those hallways, facing the people who'd spent years treating me like I was invisible, or, worse, like I was entertainment. The video's comment section was a war zone. Thousands of supportive messages, but also the other kind, the kind that made my stomach turn. It's fake. Someone else is singing, probably auto-tuned. Feel-good story, but let's be real, he's not that good. Why does everything have to be about race? Can't we just enjoy the performance? That last one always made me laugh bitterly, as if my race and disability weren't the exact reasons Tyler had targeted me in the first place. As if the joke would have worked the same way if I'd been white and sighted. But there were other comments too, from people who understood, from other blind kids who said I'd given them hope, from parents of disabled children who said they'd shown the video to their kids, from people who'd been underestimated and saw themselves in my story. When I returned to school on Tuesday, everything had changed and nothing had changed. People knew my name now, knew my face. I heard whispers of recognition instead of mockery, but I also heard the skepticism, the people who couldn't reconcile the blind kid they'd ignored with the voice they'd heard. Tyler was waiting at my locker. I could tell by the cologne. Expensive, overpowering, the kind that announced his presence. Before he spoke, "Quite the performance yesterday," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Guess you've been holding out on us." "Guess so. Look, man, I just wanted to say, no hard feelings, right? About the audition thing. I mean, it worked out great for you. You're basically famous now." There it was. The reframing, the attempt to rewrite history so that he was somehow responsible for my success instead of trying to engineer my humiliation. It was almost impressive, the speed at which he'd pivoted. "Sure, Tyler. No hard feelings." He clapped me on the shoulder, that same false camaraderie from before, and walked away. But I heard what he said to his friends once he thought he was out of earshot. Kid's got one good performance, and suddenly he thinks he's Beyoncé. Let's see how he handles the actual talent show. 3-minute audition is different from a full performance under real pressure. And there it was. The next phase. Tyler couldn't accept that his joke had backfired, so now he was setting up the next test, the next opportunity for me to fail and restore his worldview. What he didn't know was that Marcus and I had already started preparing for exactly that. The audition had been the opening act. The talent show would be the main event. But first, I had to deal with the aftermath of going viral. The attention was overwhelming in ways I hadn't anticipated. My social media, which I'd barely used before, was flooded with messages, interview requests from local news stations, an invitation to perform at a community event, even a message from a motivational speaker who wanted to feature my story in his next book. Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside after music class. "Nathan, I owe you an apology. I've had you in my class for 2 years and I never pushed you the way I should have. I saw your potential, but I didn't advocate for you the way I would have for other students." It was honest, at least. More honest than most of the adults at Riverside High had been. "I want to help you prepare for the talent show," she continued. "I know you have. your vocal coach, but I can help with stage presence, with connecting to the audience, with all the performance aspects beyond just the singing." I accepted, not because I needed her help, but because I understood what she was really offering. Redemption. For herself, maybe, but also a chance to be part of something that was bigger than both of us. The truth was, I did need help with the non-vocal aspects. Marcus was brilliant with technique, but he'd been out of the performance game for years. Mrs. Henderson had directed dozens of school productions. She knew how to work a stage, how to command attention, how to make a performance memorable beyond just the music. We started meeting twice a week after school. She taught me how to use the stage space, how to position myself for maximum impact, how to interact with an audience I couldn't see but could feel. She was tough, demanding, pushing me in ways that complemented Marcus's training. "You have the voice," she told me during one session, "but the talent show isn't just about singing. It's about creating a moment. It's about making people feel something they'll remember long after the notes fade." At home, my grandmother's absence felt heavier than usual. She'd been gone for 2 years, but I still found myself wanting to tell her about everything that was happening. She would have understood the complexity of it, the triumph mixed with exhaustion, the validation mixed with the weight of suddenly being visible after years of invisibility. My mum found me in my room one evening, sitting with my grandmother's old record player. I'd been listening to the vinyl albums she'd left me: Aretha Franklin, Sam Cooke, Mahalia Jackson, the voices that had shaped my understanding of what singing could be. "She'd be so proud of you, baby," Mom said softly. "Not just because you can sing, but because of how you're handling all of this, the attention, the pressure, the people who still don't want to believe in you. I miss her, I know, but she's here, in your voice, in your strength, in the way you refuse to let anyone make you small. That's all her." The weeks leading up to the talent show were a strange mix of preparation and psychological warfare. Tyler and his friends had shifted tactics. They couldn't mock my ability anymore, so they focused on everything else. Heard Nathan's performance was edited before it got posted online, I heard someone say in the hallway. My cousin knows someone who knows his vocal coach. Apparently the guy's basically singing for him, and Nathan just lip syncs. It's all a publicity stunt, probably planned by his mom or something. The rumors were absurd, easily disproven, but they didn't need to be true. They just needed to plant doubt, to create enough noise that my actual ability got lost in the controversy. But something unexpected happened. Other students, kids I'd never spoken to, kids who'd been invisible in their own ways, started pushing back. I was there, saw him sing live. It wasn't edited. "Why are you so desperate to tear him down? Can't you just admit he's talented?" This is exactly why people don't try. Because even when they succeed, people like you find ways to diminish it. A coalition was forming, and I hadn't asked for it. People who were tired of Tyler's reign, tired of the casual cruelty that passed for social hierarchy at Riverside High. My performance had become a symbol of something larger than just one blind kid singing well. 2 weeks before the talent show, Marcus sat me down for a serious conversation. "Nathan, I need understand something. What's about to happen? It's bigger than a high school talent show. Those industry people I mentioned, they're coming. They want to see if the audition was a fluke or if you're the real deal. This performance could change your life. No pressure, right?" I tried to joke, but my voice betrayed my nerves. "Actually, yes, pressure. Because pressure is what creates diamonds, and you're about to show everyone that you're not just talented, you're unbreakable." He was right, of course, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are different things. The weight of expectation was crushing in ways that mockery had never been. When people expected you to fail, failure was almost comfortable. But when people expected you to succeed, when they were counting on you to prove something bigger than yourself, that was terrifying. Tyler made his final move 3 days before the talent show. He approached me in the cafeteria, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, Nathan, just wanted to wish you luck for Friday. I know there's a lot of pressure on you now. Everyone's expecting this huge performance. Must be stressful, right? Knowing that if you mess up, it's not just embarrassing, it's like disappointing everyone who believed in you." It was masterful, really, disguised as support but designed to amplify my anxiety, planting seeds of doubt wrapped in false encouragement. I smiled in his general direction. "Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate the concern, but I'm not worried about disappointing people. I'm just focused on doing what I've been training to do." Right, you're training. With that coach. Must be nice having someone basically do all the work for you. And there it was. The real message, the insinuation that my success wasn't really mine, that I was just a puppet for someone else's talent. "Marcus taught me technique," I said calmly. "But the voice? That's all mine. Always has been. Some people just needed a reason to finally listen." The cafeteria had gone quiet, people sensing the confrontation. Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced. "Well, good luck anyway. Hope you don't choke under all that pressure." As he walked away, I heard someone at a nearby table say, "Why is he so threatened by Nathan? It's weird." That was the question, wasn't it? Why did my success bother Tyler so much? It wasn't just about the joke backfiring. It was about what my success represented, a crack in the social order he'd spent years maintaining. If the blind black kid could be exceptional, if he could command respect and attention, what did that say about the hierarchy Tyler had built his identity around? The night before, the talent show, I couldn't sleep. I ran through the performance in my mind, every note, every breath, every moment. Marcus and Mrs. Henderson had helped me prepare. But I also thought about everything that had led to this moment. Every time I'd been made to feel less than, every assumption about my limitations, every person who'd looked past me like I wasn't worth seeing. Tomorrow, I'd step onto that stage again. But this time, it wouldn't be a surprise. This time, they'd be expecting excellence. And somehow, that made it both easier and harder, because proving people wrong when they expect you to fail is one thing, but meeting expectations when people finally believe in you, that's when you discover what you're really made of. And as I finally drifted off to sleep, I thought about my grandmother's words one more time. "Baby, they can take a lot of things from you, but they can't take your gift." Tomorrow I'd make sure everyone understood exactly what that meant. The day of the talent show arrived with the weight of a storm about to break. I woke up to my phone buzzing with messages. Marcus checking in, Mrs. Henderson sending encouragement, my mom reminding me to eat breakfast, even though my stomach was in knots. And then, buried among the supportive texts, one from an unknown number. "Break a leg tonight." Literally. I deleted it without responding, but the message lingered in my mind like smoke. Tyler's psychological warfare had evolved from public insinuations to private threats. Or maybe it wasn't Tyler at all. Maybe it was one of his friends. Maybe it was someone else entirely who decided that my success was somehow a personal offense. The school day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Teachers who normally never acknowledged me went out of their way to wish me luck. Students I'd never spoken to stopped me in the hallways to say they were excited to see my performance. The attention was overwhelming, suffocating in its intensity. But there was also the other side, the whispers that followed me like shadows, the skepticism that no amount of viral videos could completely erase. He's going to choke. The audition was a fluke. I heard his vocal coach is backstage doing some kind of technical thing. It's not really him singing. My brother said the whole thing is staged. The school wants good publicity. By lunch, I'd retreated to the music room, seeking refuge in the one place that had always felt safe. Mrs. Henderson found me there, sitting at the piano, my fingers tracing the keys without pressing them. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently. "No, just processing. Nathan, I've been teaching for 23 years. I've seen hundreds of talented students walk through these doors, But what you have, it's rare. Not just the voice, but the resilience, the ability to stand in front of people who've spent years underestimating you and prove them wrong with grace. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. And you know what? You'll still be more talented than 99% of the people in that auditorium, but you won't mess up. You know why? Because you've done something most people never do. You've prepared for the moment everyone else just dreams about. She was right, but knowing something intellectually didn't. Stop the anxiety from coiling in my chest like a living thing. At 2 p.m., Marcus arrived at the school. He wasn't supposed to be there until the evening performance, but he'd sensed my nerves through our text exchanges. We found an empty classroom, and he put me through a quick vocal warm-up. Not the full routine, that would come later, but enough to remind my body of what it knew how to do. "I got a call this morning," Marcus said as we finished, "from David Chen. He's a senior A&R executive at Meridian Records. He's flying in specifically to see you tonight." My hands went cold. Meridian Records was one of the biggest labels in the country. They'd launched careers that had become household names. "Marcus, I can't." "Yes, you can. Nathan, listen to me. This is what we've been working toward. Not the talent show itself, but what it represents. A platform, a moment, a chance to show the industry that you're not just a viral video or a feel-good story. You're an artist. What if I'm not ready? You've been ready for months. The question isn't whether you can do this. The question is whether you're willing to let fear steal the moment you've earned." He was right. I'd spent 18 months preparing for this. Hundreds of hours of practice, technique, emotional work. I'd earned this moment through dedication that most people my age couldn't imagine. Fear was just noise, and I'd learned a long time ago how to filter out noise. At 4 p.m., I went home to rest and prepare. My mum had taken the evening off from work, a rarity that underscored how important this was. She made my favorite meal, even though I could barely eat, sat with me in comfortable silence while I ran through breathing exercises. "Your grandmother came to me in a dream last night," she said suddenly. She was sitting in her old chair, the one with the flowers, and she said, "Tell my baby that the world is about to hear what I've always known. Tell him to sing like he's talking to me." My throat tightened. "You really dreamed that?" "I really did." "And Nathan?" She was smiling, not the polite smile she gave to strangers, the real one, the one that meant she was proud beyond words. At 6 p.m., I arrived at the school. The parking lot was packed, not just with student cars, but with news vans. The viral video had attracted media attention, and they'd descended on Riverside High like it was a major event instead of a high school talent show. Backstage was chaos. Performers running through last-minute rehearsals, parents fussing with costumes, teachers trying to maintain order. I found a quiet corner and put in my earbuds, listening to the playlist Marcus had created for me. Songs that reminded me of why I'd started this journey. Voices that had inspired me to believe I could be more than what people assumed. Tyler found me 30 minutes before the show started. I could tell it was him by the footsteps, confident, deliberate, the walk of someone who'd never questioned his right to take up space. "Big crowd out there," he said. "Lots of expectations, lots of people waiting to see if you're actually as good as that video made you look." I pulled out my earbuds. "Is there something you need, Tyler?" "Just wanted to check in, make sure you're feeling okay. You look nervous." "I'm fine, because if you need to back out, no one would blame you. I mean, with all this pressure, all these people watching, all these industry folks here specifically for you, it would be understandable if you decided it was too much." There it was. One final attempt to plant doubt, to make me question myself, to give me an exit that would confirm everything he'd always believed about me. "Tyler, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. You've spent 3 years trying to make me feel small, moving my stuff, filming me, setting up this whole audition as a joke. And you know what? It worked. For a long time I believed what you wanted me to believe, that I was less than, that I didn't belong, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity you decided to leave me. I stood up, facing where I knew he was standing. But then something changed. I stopped caring about what you thought. I stopped letting your opinion of me define my opinion of myself, and I started working on becoming so good that your mockery became irrelevant. So no, I'm not backing out. I'm going out there, and I'm going to show everyone, including you, exactly who I am and who I... Tyler, there's nothing you can do to stop it. For a moment there was silence. Then Tyler laughed, but it sounded hollow. Whatever, man. Good luck. You're going to need it. As his footsteps faded, I heard another voice. Brandon, Tyler's friend. Dude, why are you so obsessed with this? Just let it go. I'm not obsessed. I just think everyone's overreacting. It's one performance. It's more than that, and you know it. You're mad because your joke backfired, and now he's getting attention you think should be yours. That's not... It is. And honestly, it's getting weird. Just let him have this. The conversation faded as they moved away, but it confirmed something I'd suspected. Tyler's campaign against me wasn't really about me at all. It was about his own insecurity, his own fear of becoming irrelevant in a social hierarchy he'd spent years maintaining. Mrs. Henderson appeared. At my side. Nathan, we're starting in 10 minutes. How are you feeling? Ready? Good. Because I just peeked at the audience. It's standing room only. I've never seen the auditorium this packed for a talent show. You've created something special here. Whether you realize it or not, Marcus joined. Us, his presence calm and grounding. Remember everything we've worked on. The breathing, the technique, the emotional connection. But most importantly, remember why you're doing this. Not for the industry people. Not for the viral video. Not even to prove Tyler wrong. You're doing this because you have a gift, and gifts are meant to be shared. The show began with the usual mix of performances. Dance routines, comedy sketches, a magic act that went slightly wrong. The audience was polite but distracted, and I could feel their anticipation building. They weren't here for the opening acts. They were here for the viral video kid, the blind boy who'd shocked everyone with his audition. I was scheduled to perform last. Strategic placement by Mr. Peterson, who understood that I was the draw, the reason the auditorium was packed beyond capacity. As the second-to-last performer finished, a decent but unremarkable guitar solo, I made my way to the stage entrance. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. Mr. Peterson's voice came through the speakers, and I could hear the excitement in his tone. Ladies and gentlemen, Many of you have seen the video that's been circulating online. Tonight, we have the privilege of experiencing that talent live. Please welcome to the stage, performing an original arrangement, Nathan Williams. The applause was immediate and thunderous, but I also heard something else underneath. A collective holding of breath, an audience waiting to see if the magic could be recreated or if it had been a one-time phenomenon. I walked to center stage, my cane tapping against the floor in a rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. I found my mark, the spot Mrs. Henderson and I had practiced, and faced the audience I couldn't see but could feel in every nerve ending. The auditorium fell silent. Hundreds of people, all focused on me, all waiting to see if I was real or just a viral moment that would fade into internet obscurity. I thought about my grandmother, about Marcus, about my mum, sitting somewhere in that audience with tears probably already forming in her eyes, about every person who'd ever underestimated me and every person who'd finally decided to believe. And then I opened my mouth and showed them that the audition hadn't been a fluke, a trick or a moment of luck. It had been a preview of something much bigger, and they were about to witness the full performance. The song I'd chosen for the talent show was different from the audition piece. Marcus and I had spent weeks debating the selection, weighing the pros and cons of various options. You Play it safe, he'd said during one of our sessions. Do another cover, something people recognize. Give them what they expect. Or you could take a risk. Perform something original. Something that shows you're not just a talented cover artist, but an actual artist with your own voice, your own vision. We'd gone with the risk. The song was one I'd written over the past 6 months, working with Marcus to refine the melody and arrangement. It was personal, about invisibility, about being seen but not recognized, about finding your voice in a world that tries to silence you. It was everything I'd experienced at Riverside High, distilled into 3.5 minutes of music. As the opening notes played, a simple piano melody that Marcus had composed to complement my vocals, I let the first verse flow out softly, intimately, like I was sharing a secret with each person in the audience. The lyrics spoke about walking through hallways where people looked through you instead of at you, about being present but erased, existing but not acknowledged, about the peculiar loneliness of being surrounded by people who've decided you don't matter. I could feel the audience leaning in, the energy shifting from anticipation to connection. This wasn't just a performance anymore, it was a testimony, and everyone in that room who'd ever felt invisible was hearing their own story in my words. The second verse built in intensity, the music swelling as I sang about the moment you decide to stop accepting invisibility, about finding your voice not to please others, but to claim your own existence, about the power that comes from refusing to be erased. Mrs. Henderson had worked with me on the staging for this section. I moved across the stage, my cane guiding me, but not defining me, showing the audience that blindness was just one aspect of who I was, not the entirety of my identity. The bridge was where everything exploded. The music shifted from piano to a full arrangement, drums, bass, strings, all building to a crescendo that required every ounce of vocal power. I'd developed over 18 months of training. I hit notes I'd never attempted in public before, runs that Marcus had initially said were too ambitious, sustained tones that required breath control most professional singers spent years developing, and I nailed every single one. The audience erupted. Mid-performance, unable to contain their reaction, applause, cheers, gasps of disbelief, all while I was still singing. It was unprecedented, the kind of response that breaks the fourth wall between performer and audience. But I didn't let it distract me. I channeled the energy, used it to fuel the final chorus, where the song transformed from a personal story into a universal anthem. About everyone who'd been underestimated, overlooked, dismissed, about the moment you decide that other people's limitations don't define your possibilities. The final note hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. I held it until my lungs burned, until I'd given everything I had, until there was nothing left but silence and the echo of something that couldn't be ignored or explained away. When the music ended, the auditorium exploded. People were on their feet, screaming, applauding, some crying. The noise was overwhelming, almost frightening in its intensity. This wasn't polite appreciation. This was catharsis, recognition, validation, not just for me, but for everyone who'd seen themselves in my story. I stood there, breathing hard, my heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. I'd prepared for success, but this was beyond anything I'd imagined. Mr. Peterson's voice came through the speakers, but I could barely hear him over the continued applause. "Nathan Williams, everyone! I don't even have words. That was extraordinary." As I made my way off stage, I was immediately surrounded. Mrs. Henderson hugging me, her voice choked with emotion. Marcus gripping my shoulder, saying something I couldn't quite hear over the noise. Other performers congratulating me, their voices genuine despite the fact that I'd just made their performances forgettable by comparison. But then I heard another voice cutting through the chaos. Tyler's voice, though he was trying to keep it low. "It's a good song, but let's be real. The whole blind thing is doing a lot of heavy lifting. People are reacting to the story, not just the talent." I stopped, walking, turned toward where his voice had come from. Tyler, you're right about one thing. People are reacting to the story, but not the way you think. They're reacting because they recognize truth when they hear it. Because I sang about something real, something that matters, and that's what you've never understood. Talent without authenticity is just noise. I have both. Before he could respond, someone else approached, a woman I didn't recognize by voice. Nathan Williams? I'm Sarah Chen. I'm with Meridian Records. That was one of the most impressive performances I've seen from an unsigned artist. I'd love to talk to you about your future plans. My future plans. 24 hours ago, my future plans had consisted of surviving high school and maybe, if I was lucky, getting into a decent college with a good music program. Now, a major label executive was asking about my career trajectory. Yes, I'd like that, I managed to say. Excellent. I'm going to leave my card with your vocal coach. We should set up a meeting next week. Bring your parents, bring Marcus, and we'll discuss what opportunities might be available. As she walked away, I heard Tyler's voice. Again, farther away now, talking to his friends. This is insane. One performance and suddenly he's getting record deals? The whole thing is rigged. But his voice had lost its power. He sounded like what he was, someone desperately trying to maintain a narrative that reality had already disproven. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The talent show continued, though I barely registered the remaining performances. The judges deliberated, though the outcome was never in doubt. When they announced me as the winner, the applause was somehow even louder than it had been after my performance. I stood on stage, holding a trophy I couldn't see, surrounded by people who'd spent years looking past me and were now seeing me for the first time. It should have felt like victory, and it did. But it also felt like something else, like a door opening to a future I hadn't fully prepared for. After the show, the media descended. Local news stations wanting interviews, bloggers asking for quotes, someone from a national morning show requesting a phone call to discuss a potential appearance. My mum fielded most of it, her protective instincts in overdrive, making sure I wasn't overwhelmed. But there was one interview I agreed to do. A student journalist from the school newspaper who'd been one of the few people to treat me like a human being over the past 3 years. Nathan, how does it feel to go from being asked to audition as a joke to winning the talent show and getting attention from major record labels? I thought about the question carefully. Honestly, it feels like vindication, but not the kind people might think. I'm not vindicated because I proved Tyler and his friends wrong. I'm vindicated because I proved myself right. I believed I had something worth sharing, and I worked hard enough to make other people believe it too. That's the real victory, not changing their minds, but trusting my own. As we left the school that night, my mom driving us home through streets that felt different somehow, I thought about everything that had changed in just a few weeks. The viral video, the attention, the record label interest, the talent show victory. But I also thought about what hadn't changed. I was still blind, still black, still the same person who'd been invisible for 3 years. The difference was that now people were finally willing to see me. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. You did it, kid. Not just the performance, but everything it represented. Your grandmother would be so proud. I know I am. And then another text, this one from an unknown number. Congratulations. You earned it. Brandon. Not Tyler. Brandon. Tyler's friend who'd questioned his obsession, who'd told him to let it go. It was a small thing, but it mattered. It meant that even within Tyler's circle, people were starting to recognize that talent and character mattered more than social hierarchy. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety this time, but from the adrenaline of everything that had happened. I kept replaying the performance in my mind, remembering the feeling of the audience's energy, the moment when I knew I'd connected with them in a way that transcended just singing well. Around 2 a.m., I got out of bed and made my way to the living room, where my grandmother's record player still sat. I put on one of her old albums, Sam Cooke, A Change Is Gonna Come, and listened to a voice that had inspired me long before I understood what inspiration meant. The song was about hope in the face of struggle, about believing in a better future even when the present was painful. It was about change being inevitable, even when it felt impossible. As I listened, I realized that's what had happened. Change had come, not because the world had suddenly become fair or because prejudice had disappeared, but because I'd refused to accept the limitations other people tried to impose on me. The talent show had been the visible victory, but the real triumph had happened months earlier in Marcus's studio, in my grandmother's lessons, in every moment I'd chosen to work on my craft instead of accepting defeat. If you're following this journey and wondering how a single moment can change everything, subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will show you that success isn't just about one performance, but about what you do with the opportunities that performance creates. Tomorrow, I'd wake up to a new reality. Record label. Meetings, media attention, opportunities I'd only dreamed about. But tonight, I was just Nathan Williams, a blind kid from Riverside High who'd finally been heard, and that was enough. The meeting with Meridian Records happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 1 week after the talent show. My mom had taken the day off work, Marcus had cleared his schedule, and we sat in a conference room that felt more expensive than my entire house. Sarah Chen was there, along with 2 other executives and a lawyer who explained contract terms in language that might as well have been a foreign language. But the core message was clear. They wanted to sign me. Not for a single song or a trial period, but for a full development deal that would include professional recording sessions, industry mentorship, and a pathway to releasing actual music. "We see real potential here," Sarah said, "not just in your voice, but in your story, your authenticity, your ability to connect with audiences. The industry is hungry for artists who have something genuine to say, and Nathan, you have that in abundance." The offer was generous. More money than my mom made in a year, plus resources for continued training, professional production and marketing support. It was everything I dreamed about and more. But there was a catch. There's always a catch. "We'd want to move quickly," Sarah continued. "Get you into the studio this summer, start building your social media presence, potentially release a single by fall, which means you'd need to be available, flexible, committed to this full time." "He's still in school," my mom said, her protective instincts immediately activated. "He has 1 more year before graduation." "We understand, and we're not asking him to drop out, but we would need him to prioritize the music, which might mean online schooling or a reduced course load or some other arrangement that allows him to focus on his career." My career. The words sounded surreal. A week ago, my biggest concern had been surviving high school. Now, I was discussing career trajectories with record label executives. "Can we have some time to think about it?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm. "This is a major decision, and Nathan needs to consider all the implications." "Of course. Take a week. But Nathan, I want you to understand, opportunities like this don't come around often. We're offering you a chance to bypass years of struggle that most artists face, to go from high school talent show to professional recording artist. That's rare." As we left the building, my mom was quiet, too quiet. I could feel her worry radiating like heat. "What are you thinking, Mom?" "I'm thinking that this is wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. I'm thinking that you're 16 years old, and they're asking you to make decisions that will affect the rest of your life. I'm thinking that I want you to have every opportunity, but I also want you to have a childhood." Marcus spoke up from a driver's seat. "Nathan, I'm going to be honest with you. This is a good offer, better than most new artists get. But it's also a lot of pressure, a lot of commitment, and a lot of ways things could go wrong. The music industry can be brutal, especially for young artists who don't have the support systems they need. So you think I shouldn't do it? I think you should take the week to really consider what you want. Not what the label wants, not what the viral video momentum suggests, but what you actually want for your life. That night, I lay in bed trying to imagine both futures. One, where I signed the deal, dove into the music industry, potentially became successful beyond my current imagination, and one where I finished high school normally, went to college, pursued music on a different timeline. Both paths had merit, both paths had risks, and I had 1 week to decide which one to take. But then something happened that made the decision more complicated. On Thursday, 2 days after the label meeting, I was called to Principal Morrison's office. I'd rarely interacted with her beyond the occasional hallway greeting, so the summons was unusual. "Nathan, please sit down," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that felt practiced. "I wanted to talk to you about your recent success, the talent show, the viral video, the attention you've brought to Riverside High. It's been quite remarkable. Thank you. I've been thinking about how we can better support students like you, students with exceptional talents who might benefit from more flexible arrangements, and I wanted to propose something." She outlined a plan. I could finish my senior year through a combination of online classes and independent study, freeing up time for music commitments while still earning my diploma. The school would even feature my success in their promotional materials, highlighting their support of talented students. It sounded generous, almost too generous. "Why now?" I asked. "I've been at Riverside for 3 years. My talent didn't suddenly appear last week. So why is the school suddenly interested in supporting me?" There was a pause, a telling pause. "Nathan, I understand your skepticism, and you're right. We should have recognized your abilities sooner, but better late than never, right? We want to help you succeed. You want to use my success for the school's image," said flatly. "You want to be able to say that Riverside High supports talented students, even though for 3 years nobody here did anything to stop me from being bullied, filmed without consent, or treated like I was invisible. That's not entirely fair, isn't it? Where were you when Tyler Morrison was setting me up to fail? Where was the administration when videos of me were being posted online without my permission? Where was this support when I actually needed it?" Principal Morrison's voice hardened slightly. "Nathan, I understand you're upset, but you need to understand that we're offering you an opportunity here, a chance to pursue your dreams while still completing your education. I'd hate for you to make a decision you'd regret based on past grievances." There it was, the subtle threat wrapped in concern. Accept their help and their narrative, or face potential obstacles. I stood up. "Thank you for the offer, Principal Morrison. I'll discuss it with my family and let you know." As I left her office, I realized something important. Success doesn't just open doors. It also reveals who people really are. The school that had ignored me for years now wanted to claim credit for my achievements. The label wanted to capitalize on my story. Even some of my classmates who'd never spoken to me were suddenly acting like we'd been friends all along. But there were also the real ones. Marcus, who'd believed in me before anyone else. Mrs. Henderson, who'd acknowledged her failure and worked to make it right. Brandon, who'd broken from Tyler's influence to send a genuine congratulation. My mum, who worried about me but trusted me to make my own decisions. The question wasn't just about the record deal or the school arrangement. It was about who I wanted to become and who I wanted to surround myself with in that becoming. On Saturday, Tyler showed up at my house. I heard the doorbell, heard my mom answer, heard her surprised voice saying, "Tyler, what are you doing here? I need to talk to Nathan, please." My mom called me to the door, her voice uncertain. I came down, confused about why Tyler Morrison would be standing on my porch. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Alone." We sat on the front steps, an awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, Tyler spoke. "I owe you an apology, a real one. Not the fake crap I said at school. I've been a complete asshole to you for 3 years, and the talent show thing, that was supposed to be the ultimate joke. Proof that you didn't belong, that you were just, I don't know, less than. I know what it was supposed to be, But it backfired, spectacularly, and instead of just accepting that I was wrong, I kept trying to tear you down, spreading rumors, planting doubt, trying to convince everyone that your success was fake or lucky or anything except what it actually was. Earned. I waited. There had to be more. Brandon called me out, said I was being obsessed and weird, and he was right. I've been so focused on you that I didn't even realize why. It wasn't really about you at all. It was about me being terrified that if you could be exceptional, if you could overcome everything and still succeed, then what excuse did I have for being mediocre? You're not mediocre, Tyler. You're the captain of the basketball team. You have good grades. You're popular. I'm ordinary. And I've spent my entire high school career building an identity around being better than other people, especially people I decided were beneath me. But you showed everyone that talent and character matter more than social status, and that terrified me because it meant everything I'd built my identity on was worthless. It was the most honest thing Tyler had ever said to me, maybe the most honest thing he'd said to anyone. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I'm sorry for every time I didn't. He stood up to leave, but I stopped him. Tyler, I appreciate the apology, but you need to understand something. You didn't just hurt me. You created a culture where bullying was acceptable, where cruelty was entertainment. And an apology to me doesn't fix that. If you really want to make things right, you need to change how you treat everyone, not just the people who become successful enough to make you feel guilty. He nodded slowly. You're right. I'll work on that. As he walked away, I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, but sadness. Sadness for all the time and energy Tyler had wasted on maintaining a hierarchy that ultimately meant nothing. Sadness for the person he could have been if he'd spent that energy on becoming better instead of making others feel worse. That evening, I made my decision about the record deal. I called Marcus and asked him to set up another meeting with Meridian Records. When we sat down with Sarah Chen again, I had my terms ready. I want to sign with you, but with conditions. I finish high school in person at Riverside with my regular class schedule. We work around that, not the other way around. I want creative control over my music. You can guide me, advise me, but the final decisions about what I sing and how I present myself are mine. And I want it in writing that I can walk away if the arrangement stops serving my growth as an artist and a person. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. You've been getting good advice. I've been learning to value myself. There's a difference between being grateful for an opportunity and being desperate for validation. I'm grateful, but I'm not desperate. Fair enough? We can work with those terms. It'll mean a slower rollout, a more gradual build, but honestly, that might be better in the long run. Artists who build sustainable careers usually do it gradually, not overnight. We shook hands, or rather, she shook my hand while I tried not to think about the fact that I'd just negotiated a record deal at 16 years old. The news broke the following week. Local media covered it first, then regional, then national. Viral talent show star signs major record deal, read the headlines. My social media exploded with congratulations, interview requests, and the inevitable backlash from people who thought I didn't deserve it. But I'd learned something important. Other people's opinions of my worth were irrelevant. I knew what I'd sacrificed, what I'd worked for, what I'd overcome. That knowledge was armor against both excessive praise and unwarranted criticism. At school, the dynamic had shifted completely. I wasn't invisible anymore, but I also wasn't a spectacle. I was just Nathan, the kid who could sing, who'd signed a record deal, who was still showing up to calculus class and eating lunch in the cafeteria. Tyler kept his distance, but I noticed small changes. He stopped his friends when they started to mock another student, spoke up when someone made a cruel joke. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. And me? I kept working, kept training with Marcus, kept writing songs, kept preparing for a future that was bigger and more complex than anything I'd imagined when I'd agreed to audition as a joke. Because that's what they didn't understand. The Tylers of the world, the people who'd underestimated me, the ones who thought success was about luck or sympathy or anything except hard work. They didn't understand that the audition, the talent show, the record deal, those were just visible markers of something much deeper. They were proof that when you refuse to accept other people's limitations, when you work harder than anyone expects, when you transform pain into purpose, you don't just succeed. You redefine what success means. 6 months later, I stood in a professional recording studio in downtown Los Angeles, laying down vocals for my debut single. The studio was nothing like Marcus's home setup. This was state-of-the-art equipment, sound engineers who'd worked with Grammy winners, producers whose names I'd seen on albums I'd listened to for years, but the fundamentals were the same. Breath control, emotional connection, technical precision, all the things Marcus had drilled into me during those 18 months of training. "Nathan, that was incredible," the producer said through the speakers. "Let's do one more take and I think we'll have it." One more take. I'd already done 7, each one slightly different, each one capturing a different emotional nuance. This was the reality of professional recording. Perfection wasn't achieved in a single moment, but built through repetition and refinement. As I sang the final take, I thought about how far I'd come, not just from the talent show or the viral video, but from the kid who'd spent years making himself invisible to avoid being hurt. That kid was gone, replaced by someone who understood that visibility came with both opportunities and challenges, and that both were worth facing. The single released in early spring, timed to coincide with my high school graduation. The label had wanted to release it earlier, to capitalize on the viral momentum, but I'd insisted on finishing school first. Some things mattered more than optimal marketing timing. The song debuted on several streaming platforms and radio stations, accompanied by a music video that told my story without exploiting it. It wasn't about being blind or being black or being bullied. It was about being human, about finding your voice, about refusing to be defined by other people's limitations. The response was overwhelming. The song charted not at #1, but high enough to be considered a legitimate success. More importantly, it resonated. I received messages from people all over the country. Kids who'd been bullied, adults who'd been underestimated, people who'd spent years believing they didn't matter and were finally starting to believe otherwise. One message in particular stood out. It was from a 13-year-old blind girl in Ohio who wrote, "I've always been afraid to try out for my school choir because I thought people would make fun of me. But after hearing your story, I auditioned, and I made it. Thank you for showing me that being blind doesn't mean being invisible." That message meant more than any chart position or streaming number ever could. Graduation day arrived with the weight of an ending and the promise of a beginning. I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, and the applause was genuine. Not because I was the viral video kid or the record deal success story, but because I'd earned it the same way everyone else had, by showing up and doing the work. Principal Morrison made a point of mentioning me in her speech, talking about Riverside High's commitment to supporting talented students. I didn't call out the hypocrisy, didn't point out that her support had only materialized after my success was undeniable. Some battles weren't worth fighting, and I'd learned to choose which ones mattered. Tyler was there too, graduating with honors, heading to a good college on a basketball scholarship. We weren't friends, probably never would be, but we'd reached a kind of mutual respect. He'd learned that cruelty had consequences, and I'd learned that people could change if they chose to. After the ceremony, Marcus found me in the crowd. "Your grandmother would have loved this day, seeing you graduate, seeing you succeed, seeing you become the person she always knew you could be. I wish she was here." She is. In every note you sing, every choice you make, every time you refuse to let anyone make you feel less than. That's her legacy, Nathan, and you're carrying it forward. My mom hosted a small graduation party at our house. Nothing fancy, just family, a few friends, Marcus and Mrs. Henderson, and some classmates who'd become genuine friends over the past few months. People who'd seen past the viral video and the record deal to the actual person underneath. Brandon showed up, which surprised me. He distanced himself from Tyler's crew after the talent show, started hanging out with different people, become someone more authentic than the person he'd been pretending to be. "I wanted to thank you," he said as we stood in the backyard, "for showing me that it's possible to be yourself, instead of just going along with what everyone else expects. I spent 3 years being Tyler's sidekick, laughing at his jokes, participating in his cruelty, and I hated myself for it. But I didn't know how to stop until I saw you refuse to be what people expected. You made your own choice, Brandon. I just happened to be there when you were ready to make it. Still, thank you." As the party wound down and guests started leaving, I found myself alone in the backyard, listening to the sounds of celebration fading into evening quiet. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen at Meridian Records. "Congratulations on graduating. Ready to talk about album plans? We're thinking a fall release, 10 to 12 tracks, mix of original songs and carefully selected covers. Thoughts? An album. A full album. A year ago I'd been invisible. Now I was planning a professional music release that would be heard by thousands, maybe millions of people. It should have felt surreal, but instead it felt inevitable. Not because success was guaranteed or easy, but because I'd done everything necessary to earn it. The work, the preparation, the refusal to accept limitations, all of it had led to this moment. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. The music industry was notoriously difficult, especially for young artists. There would be challenges ahead, obstacles I couldn't yet imagine, moments when I'd question whether I'd made the right choices. The difference was that now I knew I could handle it, because I'd already faced the hardest challenge of all, believing in myself when no one else did. Over the summer, I split my time between recording sessions in LA and vocal training with Marcus back home. The album was taking shape, a mix of songs about my experiences and songs about universal themes that anyone could relate to. The label wanted to market me as an inspirational story, but I pushed back, insisting that the music had to stand on its own merit, not just as a feel-good narrative. "People will listen once because of the story," I told Sarah during one of our meetings, "but they'll only keep listening if the music is actually good. I don't want to be a viral moment that fades. I want to be an artist who builds a career." She smiled. "You're wise beyond your years, Nathan. Most artists your age are just focused on getting famous. You're thinking about sustainability, longevity, artistic integrity. That's rare." I had good teachers. In August, I performed at a music festival, my first major public performance since the ICU talent show. The crowd was huge, thousands of people who'd come to see multiple artists, not just me. I was scheduled early in the day, before the headliners, when the audience was still filtering in and not fully engaged. But when I walked on stage and started singing, something magical happened. People stopped what they were doing. Conversations paused. The scattered crowd coalesced into an audience, all focused on the blind kid with the white cane who was singing like his life depended on it. By the time I finished my set, the crowd had tripled in size, and the applause was deafening. Festival organizers approached me afterward, talking about bringing me back next year, maybe giving me a better time slot, potentially even a headlining position if my album did well. It was validation, but more importantly, it was confirmation. I wasn't just a viral video or a feel-good story. I was a legitimate artist who could command a stage and connect with audiences who knew nothing about my background. In September, a month before my album release, I did an interview with a major music magazine. The journalist asked the question I'd been asked 100 times in various forms. How Does it feel to go from being bullied to being successful? I thought carefully before answering. It feels like justice, but not the kind people usually think about. I'm not successful because I proved my bullies wrong. I'm successful because I proved myself right. I believed I had something worth sharing, and I worked hard enough to make that belief a reality. The bullies were just noise. The real story is about learning to trust yourself when no one else does. The article came out a week before the album release, and that quote went viral. Not as viral as the original talent show video, but enough to spark conversations about bullying, resilience, and the difference between revenge and self-actualization. The album released on a Friday in October. I spent the day in my room, too nervous to check streaming numbers or read reviews. My mom had to physically take my phone away to stop me from obsessively refreshing social media. "Baby, you did the work," she said gently. "You made something beautiful. Now you have to let it go and trust that people will hear what you created." By evening, the numbers started coming in. The album had debuted in the top 20 on multiple charts. Reviews were overwhelmingly positive, with critics praising the emotional depth, vocal technique, and mature songwriting. Several tracks were being added to major playlists. It wasn't a #1 debut or a record-breaking phenomenon, but it was solid, sustainable success, the kind that suggested a real career, not just a moment. Marcus called, his voice thick with emotion. "Nathan, I've worked with a lot of talented people in my career, but watching you grow from that kid humming in a grocery store to this, it's been the honor of my life. I couldn't have done it without you." Yes, you could have. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe the path would have been different, but you would have found your way, because that's who you are, someone who refuses to accept limitations. A month after the album release, I received an invitation that felt like a full-circle moment. Riverside. I wanted me to perform at their winter concert, to inspire current students and show them what was possible. My first instinct was to decline. Why would I go back to a place that had ignored me for years and only acknowledged me after I'd succeeded elsewhere? Why give them the satisfaction of claiming credit for my achievements? But then I thought about the students who were currently invisible, the kids being bullied, underestimated, treated like they didn't matter, the ones who needed to see that success was possible, that their current circumstances didn't define their future. Possibilities. I accepted the invitation. The concert was in December, in the same auditorium where I'd performed at the talent show, but this time I wasn't a student hoping to prove myself. I was a professional artist, returning to share what I'd learned. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, parents, community members. I saw familiar faces in the crowd. Mrs. Henderson, who'd become a genuine mentor. Brandon, home from college for winter break. Even Tyler, sitting in the back, his expression unreadable. I performed 3 songs from my album, and the response was electric. But the moment that mattered most came after the performance, during the Q&A session Mr. Peterson had organized. A freshman raised her hand, her voice shaking slightly. "How did you keep going when everyone was against you? How did you not just give up?" I thought about the question, about all the moments I'd wanted to give up, all the times invisibility had seemed easier than fighting to be seen. I kept going because I realized something important. I said, other people's opinions of me were just that, opinions. They weren't facts. They weren't truth. They were just reflections of their own limitations, their own fears, their own inability to see past surface-level differences. And once I understood that, their opinions lost their power over me. I stopped trying to prove them wrong and started focusing on proving myself right. Another student asked, "Do you ever wish you could go back and change how things happened, like skip the bullying and just be successful from the start?" "No," I answered honestly, because the struggle taught me things that success never could. It taught me resilience, empathy, the value of real friendship versus fake popularity. It taught me that the People who believe in you before you're successful are the ones worth keeping in your life. If I'd been handed success without earning it, I wouldn't appreciate it the same way, and I definitely wouldn't be the same person. After the event, as I was packing up to leave, Tyler approached me. We hadn't spoken since graduation, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "That was really good," he said simply. "The performance, the Q&A, all of it. You've become someone important, Nathan. Not just successful, but important. There's a difference." "Thanks, Tyler. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at graduation, about how apologizing to you wasn't enough, that I needed to change how I treat everyone. And you were right. I've been working on it. It's harder than I thought, unlearning years of being an asshole. But I'm trying. That's all anyone can do. Try to be better than they were." Yesterday, he nodded, started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm glad your life turned out the way it did. You deserved better than how I treated you, better than how this school treated you. And I'm sorry it took your success for me to see that." As I left Riverside High, that night, probably for the last time, I felt something unexpected. Gratitude, not for the bullying or the struggle, but for the journey that had transformed me from an invisible kid into someone who refused to be unseen. The music career continued to build. More performances, more interviews, more opportunities. But I never forgot where I'd come from, never lost sight of the fact that success wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about using your platform to help others find their voices. I started a foundation to provide music lessons for blind and visually impaired kids who couldn't afford professional training, partnered with schools to create anti-bullying programs that actually addressed systemic issues instead of just offering empty platitudes, used my social media to amplify other underestimated artists who deserved recognition, because that's what I'd learned through all of this. The best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's becoming so successful, so impactful, so undeniably important that their cruelty becomes irrelevant. It's building something bigger than their small-mindedness could ever comprehend. Tyler Morrison had asked me to audition as a joke, expecting me to fail, expecting to create another viral moment of humiliation. Instead, he'd given me a platform to show the world what I was capable of. He'd meant it as cruelty, but it had become the catalyst for everything that followed. And that's the ultimate irony. Sometimes the people who try to tear you down end up being the ones who push you toward your destiny, not because they meant to, but because their cruelty forces you to become stronger, more determined, more resilient than you ever would have been without them. My grandmother had been right all along. They could take a lot of things from me, my sight, my social status, my comfort, but they couldn't take my gift. And when I finally got the chance to share that gift, it didn't just change my life. It changed the lives of everyone who heard it and recognized their own struggle in my story. Success isn't about proving your enemies wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about refusing to accept other people's limitations as your own. It's about working so hard, becoming so skilled, creating something so undeniable that silence becomes the only possible response. Tyler Morrison thought he was setting up a joke. Instead, he set up a revolution. One voice, one performance, one refusal to be invisible at a time. And if you followed this journey from a cruel joke to a professional music career, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove the most powerful response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's excellence so profound that it rewrites the narrative entirely. Because in the end, the blind black boy who was asked to sing as a joke didn't just leave the room speechless. He left the world listening. And that's a sound that echoes far beyond any auditorium, any viral video, any moment of temporary fame. That's the sound of someone who refused to be silenced. And once you find that sound,